Okay, hello, welcome to another GCSE Geography revision session. Moving topic now, so we're actually going to go on to look at rivers. And the whole purpose of this first video is just to look at some of the key aspects of a river right from the start of the unit. So looking at some of the key features, looking at the idea of the hydrological cycle, and a little bit about how a river changes from its source, where it starts, to its mouth, okay? So hopefully you can see this. It might be a little bit far away today. We haven't got the zoom feature on the video. Remembering then that there are some key features which you should know for a river. You should know that the source is its starting point. You should know that the drainage basin is the entire area of land that's drained by a river. And that includes obviously the main river channel and its tributaries. So if you get a definition question about a drainage basin, it is those two key points. It's the whole area of land drained by a river and its tributaries. You've got the tributary, obviously that's a small river that joins the main channel. You've obviously got the watershed, which is almost your border, your boundary between two river basins. The watershed marks the end of one river basin and the start of the next. Other features that are worth knowing, your confluence is the point where two rivers join, so where usually a tributary joins the main river channel. Your meander is a bend or loop in a river. We'll come on to more about those later because they're a good example of a river landform that changes over time. The floodplain land on either side of the river that floods when the river reaches capacity and then bursts its banks. And then you've got the mouth or the estuary, small mouth, larger estuary where the river enters the sea. Okay, so be aware of your definitions, okay? We've got some on the board here. Again, it might be a bit far away to appreciate them, and we've spoken about them on the previous slide, but know that the starting point of a river is the source. Know that a location where two rivers meet is a confluence, okay? So, know your key terms, listing them down there. A couple more, certainly one more I think that we haven't mentioned is the idea of a delta new land that's created by the river, okay? So you've then got the idea of the hydrological cycle, so the idea of the fact that water operates within a system, I suppose. So you know that your river is part of a system. Again, where might these come in? Maybe definitions, maybe asking you what is meant by the term evaporation, what is meant by the term condensation. So another part of our video is a quick guide to the hydrological cycle. So water enters the cycle through two processes: evaporation, where water leaves seas or lakes or rivers and rises up into the atmosphere, or transpiration, where it leaves trees or vegetation. You can combine those two to create evapotranspiration, a longer word, all right? And so if the question is, what is evapotranspiration? You can say where water is evaporated from the Earth's surface, trees and vegetation, rivers or lakes, and evaporates into the atmosphere, okay? As it evaporates, obviously it means colder air and cools down, and that's what forms clouds, okay? That process is called condensation, where your water vapour turns back to water droplets, really, and the process begins again. Precipitation is obviously when it rains, and you rain or your water in the form of rain, snow, hail, sleet, etc., reaches the ground. Once it gets to the ground, a number of things happen, okay? Water will find its way back to the sea through surface runoff, okay? Or back to a river through surface runoff, so water running over the surface. Trees will help prevent that from happening because trees will intercept the rainwater before it reaches the ground, okay? So you've got surface runoff, water runs over the ground, down into the river. Where surface runoff is greater, you have a greater risk of flooding. You've got infiltration, which is where the water moves from the surface down into the soil, and then it can move back towards a river or the sea through flow water moving through the soil. Percolation is where it leaves the soil and flows, seeps down into the layer of rock below, and then it again can find its way back to a river or a lake or the sea through something called groundwater flow. So you'll be able to find this obviously on the school's VLE, giving you some instructions on that in your lessons. So you can find this diagram and just be aware of the way that it works and be aware of the key terms that come with it. Okay? Other things to be aware of, the idea that the hydrological cycle is a system. and therefore it's got inputs, water entering the system through precipitation. It's got outputs where it's lost from the system, so transpiration and evaporation. Some water never turns back to water, or sorry, some water vapour never turns back to water. Droplets, it's lost to the atmosphere. Groundwater flow, some water is stored underground, never finds its way back into the system. Then just be aware of your stores, where water is held, on the surface, in the soil, in groundwater channels, and be aware of your transfers, water moving through the system. Interception by trees, infiltration down into the soil, percolation down into the rock, surface runoff, overground, through flow moving through, and groundwater flow, obviously through flow moving through the soil, groundwater flow moving through the bedrock below. Okay, so this video then is mainly focused on the key features of a river, and it's also spoken about the hydrological cycle and the idea of a hydrological cycle as a system. Be aware of your key terms, be aware of your definitions, and be aware of how the hydrological cycle can operate as a system.